Wide-scale adoption of cloud applications, an increase in remote workers, and expansion of branch offices has rendered the centralized, on-premises security model impractical. Enter Cisco Umbrella. Umbrella now includes secure web gateway, firewall, and cloud access security broker functionality, plus integration with Cisco SD-WAN, all delivered from a single cloud security service. It helps businesses of all sizes secure their network and extend protection to roaming users and branch offices. Security doesn't have to be complicated. Get simple, smart, and powerful security with Cisco Umbrella. Visit securityweekly.com/Cisco Umbrella to learn more. Let's face it, cyber attackers have the advantage. ExtraHop is on a mission to help you take it back. Regain the upper hand with security that can't be undermined, outsmarted, or compromised. When you don't have to choose between protecting your business and moving it forward, that's security uncompromised. See how it works in the full product demo, free online at securityweekly.com/ExtraHop. Welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. Security Weekly Unlocked will be held in person this December 5th through the 7th at the Hilton Lake Buena Vista. We're excited to announce our first round of speakers, including Leslie Carhart, David Kennedy, Alyssa Miller, O'Shea Bowens, Maria Chinavada, Patrick Coble, Chris Eng, Eric Escobar, Nick Leghorn, Michael Schlatt, sorry, that was a new one, Kevin Johnson, and Justin Kohler. Visit securityweekly.com/unlocked to check out the Rockstar lineup and register. Also on August 26th at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, learn how to implement cloud security that actually works with the fine folks from Tanium, as well as Adrian Sanabria. securityweekly.com/webcast to register today. Of course, if you missed any previous webcasts or technical training, you can find them at securityweekly.com/on-demand. Now on to the news for this week. Kind of a light product announcement news cycle, I found. Kind of light in general on acquisitions, funding.
Light in general, but I found some stuff. I don't think we had any overlap here, so this should be good.
It's awesome. Tigera addresses the growing demand of security containers, security of containers, Kubernetes, and microservices. They say that they have, well, the thing that I really want is that single pane of glass. Like, I don't know if I think of it as like some futuristic Star Trek kind of tech where there's like glass that's your computer screen kind of thing. That's how I kind of think of it. But they have a solution that automates capabilities to deliver an easy-to-understand, action-oriented view of Kubernetes networking, which actually, if they can do that, would be really good because Kubernetes has a lot of moving parts. And they talk about the single pane of glass. Provides a single pane of glass across multi-cluster and multi-cloud Kubernetes environments to deploy a standard set of egress access controls, enforce security policies for compliance, and observe and troubleshoot applications. What do you think, Tyler, Adrian? A lot of marketing mumbo-jumbo?
It's Kubernetes.
Yeah, I kind of tuned you out there after a little bit.
Everyone's falling asleep.
No, it's you know, I lost you at single pane of glass. Everybody's a single pane of glass. And if everybody's a single pane of glass, nobody's a single pane of glass. But, you know, so that always kind of sets me off when people say we're your single pane of glass. But in this particular one, you know, when we're talking about security controls and security implementations, egress access controls, cool. Security policies for compliance, okay. You know, Kubernetes security is just kind of a weird thing. It's like Kubernetes security is specifically around the management of the containers, the scalability, the bringing up, the bringing down, the existence of the containers in that environment, and the security of the containers in that environment. Or in this particular case, it sounds like it's a little bit more along the lines of, you know, communication patterns once containers are up and running within a Kubernetes controlled environment.
Is it runtime or configuration or both, right?
That's exactly where I was going. Thanks for making it way more eloquently than I did. But enforcing security policies for compliance, you know, connectivity, it seems like it's a fairly straightforward yet needed security component around Kubernetes.
Yeah, I really think that the configuration aspect is almost more important than the runtime aspect. I think there's a lot of ways to skin the cat on the runtime. The configuration is not straightforward. I think it also probably take longer on average to remediate configuration
exposures and vulnerabilities, then so like there's a problem in runtime, right? Or a problem in the code. I'll show my limited understanding of this kind of area, but I think Kubernetes, from a runtime perspective, you've got the concept of the Kubernetes pods, what's running in the pods, and implementing security at a pod layer from the runtime side, versus doing something in container, which could be some of your endpoint protection guys, your cloud workload protection platforms, those types of things within the container itself. Both achieve very similar, if not identical, goals and value propositions to the user. Right. It's just which way you want to implement it. And then the flip side of that is the configuration of the Kubernetes setup at rest. Yeah, I think you really need something on the host side, like a capsulate would be like my crutch to protect myself at runtime. Just knowing the complexity of the applications and configuration is so vast that I know an attacker is going to get in, and I want something that's going to protect the underlying systems. If I think the runtime solution is largely dependent on what's in the container. Yeah. Right. So you could use an endpoint management and endpoint security control could go in there. Yep. You could very much use a capsulate if you're using a Linux-based system and you want that deep level of granularity. A Versec is another good another good fit too. There. Yep. But then you've got the outside-in guys, the Prisma Clouds, the Twist Locks, the other container. Qualys has layered insight. They've got to play in that space too. Everything's overlapping there. It's really confusing. Yep. Baffle Security raises $20 million to secure cloud data. So Baffle's no-code, simple-to-deploy security mesh takes a data-centric approach at cloud scale without performance impact or changes to application. So that's what they said and got $20 million. That's pretty much what I would say if I wanted $20 million. And I'm sorry to pick on them, but just that statement was just so markety speak and pitchy speak that I don't know. If it was a pitch competition, we might have laughed at them and say, "Okay, explain what you really do, like in English, please." I mean, that is English, but very marketing. Well, there's an argument there. Yeah, I feel there are English words in there put together. It's English if you define English as just make up whatever terms you want. Like take existing words and just give them new meanings. Now, turn nouns into verbs. They could do something really cool, and we're just missing it because it's a very marketing, kind of style. PR release is what we're reading. So I always like to give companies the benefit of the doubt. When it comes to that, because under the covers are likely some really smart people implementing something really cool, right? Well, my hope is by being critical of these press releases, we can kind of encourage people, to make them more readable, more understandable. Because, press release is it's a marketing opportunity, right? And we're spoiled. We sat down with the co-founder of Keeper. Darren was very to the point about what they do. They're like, "Yep, lots of players in the market, but we want to be easy to use, and we want to have the most sound encryption in engineering." Like, dude, all right, you've established your differentiators in an actual English sentence that makes sense to everyone, right? Yeah. You get into these press releases, and the waters are very muddy. In deep diving this one in particular, there's two things that caught my eye. One is data centric, right? So a lot of the security tooling you see isn't really a data centric play, but it's more some kind of infrastructure communication pattern, something like that. This particular one is data centric, and it's like, all right, maybe that's just some BS buzzword they layered in, right? Mm-hmm. But when you read the whole article, it actually says that they currently protect more than 100 billion records in financial services, healthcare, retail, industrial IoT, and government. 100 billion is not actually that many records when you think the size of some of the data stores they could be. Right, that could be a securing. Single customer. Yeah, but that's true. But they're securing data records, and the question is, how are they doing that? So, I think this one would be a must double click to dig into. Agreed. They could make an encryption library. It could be a database security product. It could be literally anything. Yep, they support all major cloud platforms, though. It could be a secrets vault. Mm. There's nothing in here that tells says how. Yeah, even just a paragraph on the how would be something for us to go on. And sometimes we do find that paragraph that's like usually 3/4 of the way down.
they try and explain exactly what they do, right? And
their name is Baffle, and we are baffled.
We are baffled.
So
they've achieved their goal.
Well,
yeah, looking at their website, it's more of a data protection play.
Gotcha.
Right on the main page of their website, they say data protection for Snowflake, de-identify and secure data pipeline end to end. So that helps narrow it a little bit.
There you go. SailPoint Workflows enable customers to automate security tasks with no code required. This is hard. I mean, this is a workflow in one of your security platforms, because as we already established, there is no single pane of glass, right? They're connecting other SaaS applications and enabling capabilities across the company's technology ecosystem with a no-code solution. To me, this is really hard because you got to get the right integrations with the right features that, from a usability perspective, allow users to tie together without writing any code. And I can tell you from experience trying to do this in something like Microsoft 365 or an Azure cloud environment, it's still super hard. Like you can't just hand that to non-technical people and go tie all that stuff together. And I truly believe what you get today is you're going to end up handing that to someone that can write a little code to make it work the way it was intended and digging deeper into it.
I find this a bit disingenuous because there's a bit of fine print that they're leaving out in that statement there, and that fine print is for products that are already integrated and supported. Correct. And of course, almost everyone's going to have something that's not. So right. In reality, almost everyone is going to have to write some code.
Yep. Agreed. That was my whole point with this article. Again, I hate picking on SailPoint. Could be an amazing product, but to support everything that a customer needs, you're likely going to at least be one short and hit a feature that doesn't exist in a particular. It could have an integration as well, but which direction is the integration and what are the features of that integration is often where I get it falls down, right? I'm trying to integrate two products together, whether it's commercial or open source, and okay, those talk to each other and share data, but not in the way I need them to. I don't get this data. I can't, correlate this data point with that data point kind of thing. So ambitious for sure. Talking about misconfiguration, there was an article from Shift Left. Security misconfigurations are a constant threat against both APIs and non-API applications alike. And I think as Tyler and you and I were just discussing, like, the configuration is always, feel like what gets you, because it's not something you can go fix in code. It's something that has been configured and overlooked, and everything's working fine. And if I change the configuration, it breaks. So therefore, I'm not going to change the configuration. But those lead to security vulnerabilities that oftentimes your various security control points, sometimes scanners, sometimes SCA, like you can have a lot of these really cool things, your DAST and your SAST and your application lifecycle, but they're going to miss that one little configuration thing that can screw you.
So for configuration security or structural security as opposed to operational security, I think the key there is trying to move your organization as close to configuration as code and infrastructure as code as you can get. Because then you transition from structural security to operational security in the sense that your configuration turns into operational code that can be assessed. The other way to do it is
what was the sponsor that did that?
That I'm not sure. You can Google that one.
Yeah.
The other way to consider it is kind of the way Jupyter 1 actually takes a look at it, and that is look at everything as an asset and look at the structural state of every individual asset and look for deviations off of acceptable norms. But that's a big problem, right? It's a big problem to solve either way.
Yeah. What was the... I can't find it easily.
I think that's a natural market for our application. Accurix, yeah. I think that's also a natural market, and I don't think anybody's thinking of it this way, but I think it's a natural market for the Vericodes, check marks, and all those guys, the SNCCs of the world to progress into.
Yeah.
Because static analysis of code should be the same thing of static analysis of configuration as code.
Yep.
Right? So to me, that's a natural extension for them that I don't think they're actually exploring yet.
Well, that's where you get your twist locks and your Aqua for your containerized environments, looking at that config and doing the scanning of your containers. But that's just part of it, right?
Absolutely.
How deep does it go, right? Because I've seen heinous web server configurations will bite you from a security perspective.
Yeah, and Twistlock, Aqua, all those guys migrated away from just container stuff anyway, to just the broader CSPM, right?
Yep.
Well, the reason why is because all that stuff is, scanning configuration is quickly commoditized, because it's basically just syntactical checks of code. Do you have this marked as a yes or a no or a true or a false, right? And so that's why the CSPM market is actually not a market, it's a feature in other markets. And I think you're going to see that over time. Everybody's got a CSPM. It doesn't matter what tech you have.
And your configuration changes as you move through environments. You go to development to staging to production. No one's dev staging in production is exactly the same. I'll make that bold statement, right? There's subtle changes.
Yep.
In some ways, you don't want it to be.
Yeah.
Like you don't want like customer data and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Or
it's cost too, right? Do I need to spin up huge clusters and all the elastic stuff in dev, right? I need that in production.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Totally.
Digital Shadows has launched 2 premium professional services. So I thought it was interesting. A couple of things in this article: takedowns as a service. So, like, if there's a domain impersonation attack, they'll go ahead and just like take care of that for you. I thought that was pretty valuable. Some of the services they talk in here, I think, are a pretty good extension of your team, right? To kind of back to my earlier point with Ali, keep your team focused on their objectives and not get hung up on doing all of the response and all the remediation. And something like, taking down domains, there's an art to that, certainly, that I think can be left to a provider. And I think it's an interesting little pivot for Digital Shadows.
Well, and that's kind of a must in this category. Everybody in this category does that. If you look at like everybody from Mark Monitor, which is like the more traditional approach to it, and I think, all the old ones have been acquired now. I haven't kept up with where they are, but Risk IQ will do it. There was Area 1 Security, which I think turned into something else, but all kind of offshoots of the attack surface management stuff, where I kind of think of this stuff as data loss detection, or, detecting attackers setting up the infrastructure, so the hope is that you catch them registering the domain names and stuff like that before they actually launched a phishing attack and capture credentials from your customers and your employees and stuff.
Absolutely. Praetorian launches GoKart. I like the name. It's an open source. It looks like a static analysis tool for Go. They're doing single static assignment, structuring every value computed by the program as an assignment to a unique variable. It's using compilers for optimization. In a security context, it can trace the source of input throughout your entire application. I think it's to like one form, like maybe a good thing to have in your arsenal, but it seems like just one form of static analysis. I'm not sure if it does, goes deeper in other areas, but they seem to hop on the single static assignment aspect. Yeah,
this isn't. I don't. Maybe this is a new version of what traditionally in the SAST world, the static analysis world, was always called data control and data flow analysis. Basically taking the system and putting it back to an abstract syntax tree, and then tracking your data flow and code flow through that tree. This seems like it might be a slightly different way of doing something similar, but it's, to go back to a conversation we had offline, it's more about the user experience in this particular case. So what if you're doing single static assignment in some new way of speeding up maybe 2% or 5% static analysis? Well, great, good for you. What I like about this is that it's open source. It's an open source static analysis scanner for Go. I don't particularly care about how they're doing it. What I like is the fact that there's a Go version I can use for free, and I don't have to go buy Veracode or Checkmarks or whoever.
Right. No, I completely agree, and I think for open source projects, it's a great thing too to have a free tool to make sure that you don't have some obvious, basically overflows. Largely is probably what I would imagine it's looking at based on the on the description. I think there's a lot of other bugs you could have in your code.
Yeah.
As we've chronicled on shows, like especially when we talk to security researchers and you dig into, usually it's more than one vulnerability that they're stringing together to get to that code execution point. I still think static analysis is struggling with that stuff. Otherwise, we wouldn't have that in code. I mean, we've seen, integer overflows, type conversions lead to code execution that's been in open source code for 20 years. So you tell me that never had a static analysis run against it?
Yeah.
Maybe.
I'd be surprised.
Maybe in some it hasn't. There's tens of millions of lines of code just in the kernel. And I don't know what the ratio is from core code to kernel drivers, but it's a lot of code.
Yep.
Microsoft is probably doing it on their end, and even
we did it.
Even still, they have vulnerabilities. So
we did it in Veracode in 2008. I actually, for over 6 months, ran a project where I took as many large open source free tools as I could and fed it through the Veracode scanner and reported flaws.
Yep.
Triaged them all, handled them out, reported 0 days and got them fixed, right? So I know it's being done. That was 12, 15 years ago now. So it's being done on large scales, but there's just so much code. You'll never catch up with it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. You'd think that we could get ahead of it and really squash the problem down to like raising the bar of the bug hunters and like making them find really esoteric things. But the thing that counteracts that is, like you said, Tyler, just the sheer amount of code.
Yeah, one thing that I just thought of now is maybe the right way to do that is to look for the code that's out there in the world that's the most reused code.
Yep.
And target that from a scanning perspective for the reuse issue and trying to leverage that repeatability of it. Maybe that's the better way. But either way, code just gets cranked out so fast every day around the world now that we'll never keep up with open source.
Well, and it changes. What could be a bug today may not be a bug tomorrow because the kernel developers released a fix and like now my exploit doesn't work. Wheel actually said that, a Qualys researcher, his interview, that the code changed and they had to change how they were exploiting it.
Yeah, I do think at some point application security testing will get to an 80-20 rule of having found the vast majority.
Yeah.
We're just not there yet. If you think of network security, but pre-cloud network security, it hit an 80-20 rule. Most people had decent security a few years back, right? AppSec will get there too, but by the time that happens, CloudSec dominates or some other new emerging underlying foundation will dominate and it'll start that counter all over.
Right. On vulnerability management, a topic Adrian and I are really hot and heavy about right now. CVSS, we're in deep, and CVSS scoring certainly plays into it. Now, I like the NVD. They link to it in here. The NVD calculator. So this is where you can go calculate the CVSS calculator. There's a link to it in the article that I link to. And there's 20 plus different kind of scores and vectors that you can put in there to evaluate a particular vulnerability. Now, I most people aren't going to do this for even a portion of the vulnerabilities that are reported or that you discover. And you really need a tool that's going to do that for you and allow you to overlay information on, is the asset exposed to the internet? Can vary, that can be inferred from discovery, right? Kind of a tip of the hat to Jupiter 1, right? Mm-hmm. Whether or not an asset or instances in my environment, like how many do I have of this particular browser, right? So to me, it came down to overlaying asset information with some information about the organization. Are these important applications, not so important applications, exposed to the internet or not? Right. Do they talk to something important, right? Does that app talk to a database that's important?
All that environmental context.
Yeah.
And PCI actually requires you to do this.
Yep.
There's a requirement in PCI that says that
which requirement isn't, Adrian?
God, I don't know.
That's a requirement for all the hosts now. We all have to memorize all of the different requirements.
I thought it was safe from that without Jeff being on here, but I'd have to look it up. It's under 6. It's something under 6. It's requirement 6. 6.3 dot something.
Wow. The fact that you even know it's 6 is super impressive, man. That's amazing.
In my career as a QSA, I only filled out, maybe a little over a dozen rocks, but it sticks with you. I dealt with it for a large part of my career because I started out at a large payment processor, and I was there. I had just moved into security when we started preparing for version 1.0 of PCI. I was going to say,
and it changes over time too.
And I knew that thing inside and out, so painful memories. But
so I like tools that got use some automation in this process, because you're not going to go through it for every in our vulnerability management process. I showed Adrian a screenshot yesterday, and I was like, this scanner, when it reported that stuff, I just took a sample and I'm like, I'll go manually investigate it, and I'm like, those are all false positives, every single one of them. And I'm like, this is the reason why you really want a good vulnerability management platform and process, because you're not doing this across hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, or millions of hosts. You're just not.
Yeah, and in large orgs, it's painful to see how many people they have devoted to just messing with vulnerability management and patch related stuff. At the payment processor, we had somebody that all they did was they submitted. Every time we had a false positive on an ASV scan, which you have a vulnerability management vendor run this external vulnerability scan, and they set up all the parameters. You can't modify the scan in any way.
No. You have to deal with those results regardless.
You got your hands tied behind your back. You're just standing there, and somebody's taking aim at you, and all the false positives that come out of that, you have to or at least you used to. I don't know if you still have to.
No, you still do. You have to address every single. Well, when I help someone with it,
get exceptions.
Yeah,
and we had a guy. That's all he did. That was his entire job.
Jupiter One. We have one customer, I think, that has 800,000 or more vulnerabilities imported into our system, and like you said, its context is everything. So what they do is they import all those vulnerabilities from all their scanners into Jupiter One, and they augment. They essentially enrich the vulnerabilities with their structural asset context, right?
Yeah.
And then they're able to quickly triage from there the important ones from the less important ones, the duplicates, et cetera.
Right. Now, I will say, I'd have a list that is very dynamic of stuff that I just want to go fix, right?
Yep.
Context to me, if it's the print spooler vulnerability or string of vulnerabilities, just go fix them. If it's something like a sudo vulnerability, just go fix it. It's got a high visibility with coupled with a provable exploit. To me, just even those two factors, just go fix it, right? And those are fewer in number.
But what if you even take those and cross-reference those with context of who owns that target, that device?
Yeah, well,
that context alone just cuts your time immediately.
Yes, knowing who owns the asset, what asset. Let's hope Jupiter One can do that for me, because that's a sorely missing feature in my previous lives, right? Who owns that? Wait, it's the pseudo vulnerability is on there. I gotta dig to find who owns that asset. That's important.
That's right.
Adrian, sorry, you had comments and then transition to some of your stories.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no more comments on that.
We could talk. That's a whole rabbit hole.
We've got whole segments coming up on that.
I can't wait to hear them.
Yeah, so there's a $8 billion antivirus empire emerging. I'm not sure if you guys knew.
So I heard 2005 is flashing back according to your notes.
Yeah. So this reminded me like when I read this. So Norton LifeLock and Avast are merging. And I
was Avast always Avast, or was it a conglomeration, or they were always a standalone?
No. Yeah. So Avast acquired what it was a three initial one.
AVG. Was it AVG?
AVG.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they acquired AVG a few years ago. Yeah, so this consolidation of legacy AV has been happening for a while. Most of the AV companies were kind of slow on the uptake when EDR and next gen AV hit, and a lot of them just got kind of left in the dust. And this is the dust being kind of cleaned up. And this is almost entirely small business and consumer stuff, because so Symantec first broke up with Veritas back in 2014, And then in 2019, the consumer stuff got split out as that's why it's called Norton LifeLock. Those were the consumer-facing brands, and the enterprise folks knew Symantec as the brand, and that went over to Broadcom within the CA Computer Associates Group, which Broadcom gobbled up. I think also in 2019, 2018, something like that. So yeah, it's almost like just like sweeping up what's left on the floor here. It's kind of the way I see this. It reminded me of like, there were talks. Blockbuster was looking at merging with Hollywood Video back in 2005. And it's funny because when you go back and look at those, the big concern back then wasn't Netflix. It was whether the FTC would allow it, because of antitrust concerns. So just kind of a funny idea that they were concerned about antitrust when, both companies would essentially be gone within 10 years. And I'm kind of thinking, that might be kind of the same with Norton and Avast here. I mean, they've got to be shrinking.
Yeah, I would agree totally. You know what this is, though? Having spent some time inside of private equity, this is a squeeze the blood from the turnip move. Yep. We're just taking a recurring cash flow that is throwing off positive dollars, and we're gonna, hey, if I pay $8 billion over 2 years, I repay the $8 billion. If I can get this thing to stretch for 5 to 7 or 10, it's all straight profit. Mm-hmm. That's what it is.
Yeah, it's all tiny margin, heavily discounted.
Included with your Dell laptop.
Yep.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Nuisanceware that gets pre-installed. Yeah.
I like your Hollywood Video and Blockbuster.
Good analogy.
Was there another one in there? I feel like there was another one. Or was it just Hollywood Video and Blockbuster?
I was a Blockbuster guy for sure.
No, I think those were the two big ones. I can't think of another big one. A video rental place?
Yeah.
You're trying to think?
Hollywood Video, did that have like a black and red kind of logo feel to it?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
So it was Hollywood Video. Yeah.
Yeah, funny stuff. Also, Sophos acquired Refactor, which they're calling SOAR, but it's not really the SOAR as you think of SOAR. It's more like a DevOps SOAR. So not really competing with the Phantoms and the Cortex XSOARs of the world. This is more about DevOps, automating DevOps workflow.
But has Sophos successfully made the pivot from that traditional AV world? Because they've been around in that traditional AV world for a while.
Yeah, I mean, they acquired, I'm sure you remember the name better than me. Was it Astaro?
Astaro, yep.
Yep. So I mean, they've been as associated with UTMs as AV in the last 10 years at least. But yeah, I feel like they did as good a job as Palo Alto has been doing, and kind of making the switch to more of a big security vendor.
Right.
I mean, instead we just got finished talking about Symantec. Them and McAfee used to be in Checkpoint to some extent. The example of the Lowe's or the Home Depot of cybersecurity. Just one-stop shop for everything you need.
But Symantec is still a player in the enterprise, right? Because they have Symantec endpoint protection. That's separate from Norton.
Yep, and that's separated out. So sure, yeah, you could say they're still a player.
Right.
I mean, they still have footprint mostly in places. I mean, it's high friction replacing endpoint like that. McAfee with its trying to remember the name of the what was their system that allow you to integrate things?
EPP?
No, that's the name of the category.
Oh.
It's EPO. Thank you.
EPO. Yes, I was one off.
Policy orchestrator.
The policy orchestrator. That's what I was trying to say, but I said EPP instead.
Yeah. I owe Dimitri one.
Thank you, Dimitri.
In the Discord for dropping that for me.
Security product history for 100, Alex.
So I mean, they're still kicking around in enterprises where it's just difficult to replace them, or they're doing a good enough job that it just doesn't make sense to go out and replace them.
Well, Symantec picked up Javelin, and listeners remember Javelin Networks as a sponsor on the show. Active Directory security, great.
Sure.
I mean, amazing tech, amazing company. And when they went there, I wanted to see Symantec still going that, because I'm like, now you've got this super cool AD security product still in active development today.
So I think, the opportunity was around, 2000, what was it, 2017, something like that, when they had a shakeup of the whole leadership team.
Yes.
When Stephen Brown left, and you had the exec team from Blue Coat come in, and Symantec acquired Blue Coat. I think that's when a lot of us were hoping to see kind of a shakeup there and see Symantec reinvented and no longer be one of those places that cool companies get acquired into and die, like Foundstone did into McAfee.
McAfee, yeah.
And it's interesting, like we didn't see that happen with Cisco. When SourceFire went into Cisco, you saw the opposite happen. Cisco didn't really have a whole lot of credentials, cybersecurity credentials. I mean, they sold, firewalls and stuff.
Yeah,
but,
I mean, it's been a long play for Cisco, but now with Umbrella, Duo, and SourceFire, I mean, they're killing it.
Yeah.
Them and Palo Alto Networks both did a great job of reinventing themselves from hardware sellers to cloud.
Cisco still sells a lot of hardware,
offers.
though. I'm sure.
They both do. But if you look at the growth percentages on the bottom line, the cloud software side is crushing it.
Right. Someone still has to supply the router. Well, I guess computers, not so much from Palo Alto or Cisco, right? But the routing and firewall hardware, but to a lesser degree than you would have, because you're pushing your stuff into the cloud. I don't need as many routers and switches and firewalls physically. What else, Adrian? I think we covered all my stories.
Yeah. The only ones I had left, I thought it was interesting. Daniel Miessler joined Robinhood in a security position. We don't often talk about moves, but I think it fits into Enterprise Security Weekly. When highly visible thought leaders like get a new gig and join a new company. And it's interesting because Robinhood has kind of been getting beaten up in the press quite a bit, for being kind of like the Uber of these, like the consumer day trading apps. And, so I see it as a positive thing, the fact that Daniel's going there, because he was outspoken about them, being, kind of unethical in, how they're trying to, use this kind of mobile app, this kind of addictive, almost gambling, type of UI and UX approaches, to get people into day trading, which is maybe not the healthiest thing for folks.
Yeah. Dan joins alongside, I think Caleb Sima's over there too as CISO now.
Oh, really?
And so I'm pretty sure. Yep. And so I think, and both of those guys came in, after all of the stories broke about people being calling it gambling and all the stuff that you're talking to. And I think, hey, it's like, let's bring in some really, really strong people to create a strong security culture here and build something in a good way on the security side of it anyways. It may or may not change the gambling storyline, but.
And knowing Caleb is there just doubles down on that, because I know Caleb too. And I think that's definitely signs of hope. When you see good people going into those organizations. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And then the last thing I had was, usually when we talk about tools, we talk about Defender tools, but Brian Krebs has a post about some new anti-money laundering tools for Crooks. And basically, it's kind of like a attack surface management tool, but for folks trying to launder their cryptocurrency, like basically letting them know when what they're doing is visible, potentially to law enforcement.
Yeah, so it's interesting because I
thought that was hilarious.
A great law enforcement tactic is to follow the money. And in today's day and age, man, is that hard. I mean, that's almost like attribution, right? Attribution and following the money are super complicated today.
Yeah, and it's almost like some of these scorecard services that we see. It gives you like an overall risk score down to like here's the specific places where that risk is. Here's what you need to go do to improve your risk score as you're.
I wonder how do they do it?
Ransoming hospitals and stealing money from children.
Yeah, like how do I have to tell it where I'm storing my money or how I'm getting my money or both?
You give it a Bitcoin address or a cryptocurrency address, and it basically just like an attack surface monitoring our management tool, where you just give it the name of a company and it kind of spiders out and figures everything out. This one, you give it the address that you're using to collect ransom from, vulnerable people and businesses, and it spiders out and figures out your risk score.
I wonder if there's value. I wonder if there's value on the good side with this to say, hey, here's all the crypto that I own. I obviously didn't mine it. I bought it at some point somewhere in an exchange, right? Tell me if there's any dirtiness inside what I own.
That's really interesting. Tell me how dirty my money is.
Yeah, I mean, has it been laundered through something else? Did it go through a ransom at some point? Right? Maybe there's value on the good side of this tool as well. Not that I would ever in a million years give them my address, my address.
Right?
I mean, most things, most tools are dual use, right?
That's right.
In cybersecurity. I mean, Cobalt Strike, it feels like these days when you see a news story about Cobalt Strike, it's a 50-50, either, Help Systems is announcing a new feature or, it was found used during, a ransom attack. So, I think absolutely, Tyler, it could be, you could see that. In fact, I'd say that's almost more important. Like if you're a charity or something like that, you want to make sure you're raising money from clean sources.
Yep, absolutely. And in reading the article, each lookup costs $3 with a minimum of $30 purchase. Plans go as high as $6,000 for 5,000 checks, 5,000 requests. So not that expensive. And then the last thing I'll throw out there is the legality of this. Is it legal to create a tool so that money launderers can not get caught?
It's a question for a lawyer.
Are they doing anything illegal in that process? I mean, they're just doing analysis, right? What law is being broken there? I don't know.
Especially if you can spin it into the positive thing that I outlined, right? Then it's like, no, we don't do it for that. They can use it for that, but that's not what we're built for.
It's like Ransom Crew saying, "Oh, it's a free pen test."
Exactly.
Outstanding, gentlemen. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching to this edition of Enterprise Security Weekly. We'll see you next time.